Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 7 of Diary of a Sales Engineer. I'm Ryan Kruger,
And I'm Samir.
and together we're your hosts. And today's episode is going to be titled The Future of Sales Engineering with Christina.
And so we're super excited to have Christina Trapolino joining us here on the pod. She's going to be talking to us about the future of sales engineering. She has a really cool background. She is currently the global director of solutions consulting at Lattice and has worked in various different roles from social media marketing all the way up to the SVP of revenue. And so, Christina, we're super happy to have you and welcome to the pod. I guess just looking at your background, it's always cool to see SEs transition into revenue leaders. And I was really curious, can we just start there? Like, how did that transition work and what is your experience? And now I see you're back on the dark side of the solutions consulting role. And I think that'd be an awesome place to start.
Back on the light side. What do you mean the dark side? Sales is the dark side. No, it's a great question. Also, just for posterity and for everyone in the universe, it's Trapolino. I know we all want to make sure
Yeah.
our names are right. We all have names that are worthy of pronouncing.
Yeah. I even
um,
practiced before this and I still butchered it. So I
I know.
apologize.
I was like, right, he's gonna feel that later. Yeah, it's a great question. It like much in sales engineering, it happened with no real intention. I was working for a small startup and had joined to lead their solutions consulting function to like build it from the ground up. And the CRO at the time, it just didn't work out. But I was asked kind of, hey, it seems like, you could do this. Do you want to step in and kind of take over that function? And I said no. I was like, no, I don't want to do that. That's terrifying. I have no interest. And they said, okay, well, think about it. And then like 2 days later, it was like, we really think that here's why you should do it, right? Like you'll have a long leash and we know you've never done it before and it'll be fine. And it was just off to the races from there. So it was probably the most stressful, terrifying, and fun job I've ever had. It was great.
Would you
What
ever
did
go
you
back?
do as you, yeah, I got a question. As you got started into this new role of doing this, what did you do to get prepared for it?
Oh man. Well, first of all, I have an incredible sales and sales leadership coach, David Premer. And so when this was brought to me, I was already working with him and I immediately went to him and I was like, David, uh, what do I do? And he, was he very kind, very clear eyed about it. He was like, you don't have any idea what you're doing, but it's going to be fine. And he was right there with me. So I think having a coach is non-negotiable. I think it's especially non-negotiable when you get up into like second line and beyond leadership. It's really important that you have somebody's voice in your head that isn't working with you directly and who is in your corner but will call you out. You absolutely need that. And so that was a big piece of it. And then, the rest of it was really just about figuring out very quickly, very early on, that actually the CFO was going to be a really important person for me to work really closely with. Understanding finance, understanding like how revenue, the machine works, and like how that fits into like whether or not we're going to exist in 6 months, like runway. It was a really fast and furious education about all the things that you absolutely can't get wrong, and surprisingly how many things you can get wrong and just keep going.
I guess, how did you realize that the CFO was going to be a very important player in your new role?
Well, some of it was just personalities. We had gotten on really well when I first started. He we actually, I didn't know if we were going to get along. And it was partly because I needed to hire. I was still just running SE and I was like, hey man, like this is how comp plans work. And he was like, I don't like it. Like, what do you mean we're going to just give them commission when they didn't do the deal? And I was like, no, no, just trying to get him to understand. So I had spent a lot of time building trust and credibility with him anyway around, trying to be sensitive to what he was thinking about and understand what was driving him. And so by the time, it was probably about 8 or 9 months into the gig that the change happened with the CRO. And So by that point, we really personally had clicked quite well, and it was just a natural. I mean, he and our marketing leader we were like a little trio for sure.
Was there anything specifically that you did to help build this relationship? Like, was it one-on-one calls? Was it going out to lunch or dinner? Like anything jump out to you as like, this really changed our relationship to be more in the positive?
Oh, I would say I did have a bit of intentionality about it. I knew he was an important person to largely for me to understand, right? It was this unique opportunity. The company was only about 40 people. And so I had this like unprecedented level of access to the executive team. And he just was, to his credit, he was very curious and interested in like what made SaaS work. And I think he looked at me as someone he could learn from about how SaaS operates. And from him I could learn, not just like I joke a lot of like formulas and spreadsheets, but really like big picture thinking about the health of a business, or he made me a better negotiator. And so, I would, to your point, I would very strategically go to him and say, "Hey, Jimmy, I have to talk to a vendor about a renewal, and like coach me, like where I need to be more of a bulldog, like teach me your ways, right? Be my guide." And of course, any finance person's going to lean right on into that. So it was a lot of just trying to really understand him and what motivated him. And I think you can do that by setting up one-on-one meetings, but you can also do it by like finding really genuine, authentic reasons to ask for guidance. When you have that opportunity, you should take it.
I think that's a really good call out. Like one thing I've noticed in my career is that the more we can talk less and listen more, especially to people in leadership positions, the more likely you are to actually start building different bonds and relationships with them. I think it's just human nature to a certain degree, is people love to talk about themselves. And if you go to somebody and you say, "Hey, I just want a little bit of help," most people are willing to give the help. But you just have to sit there and listen, because if you become the person talking, 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 then they're going to say, "I don't know if I really want to help you. You don't really care to get to know me at all." And when we can just sit and listen and let them talk, we are able to digest it and then find the bits and pieces that stand out to us, or the ones we want to dive deeper into, or say, "You know what, you're really great at this one thing. I would actually love if you could tell me how you're doing it exactly like that."
Yeah.
Everybody loves to be asked a question like that. It's like, of course I want to tell you how to do that thing. So I do think that's a really, really good call out.
Yeah, I really like that last part of identifying the skills that someone else may have and then saying that, oh, I have a problem and I know this person's skills are actually really good at solving this problem, and coming to them and be like, hey, I know you're really good at XYZ. Like the CFO is really good at negotiating, and coming to them to get their expertise really helps build that bond. That's like what stuck out to me as you were speaking. I was like, that's a huge thing, identifying other people's skills and then bringing up times where it's like, oh, I know you're better than me at this. Like, give me some guidance so we can all win as a team. Uh, I guess like transitioning into more of like the future of sales engineering, I'm really curious because you've had to come up with comp plans for sales executives and AEs and comp plans for SEs. Like, where do you see our compensation shifting? And like as like the sales engineering organization, there's just been a lot of discussion about how much should we actually get a piece of like total revenue on deals versus if we hit quota, we get like a percentage of our comp plan. I'm really curious to see because you've been on both sides now at this point, and what does that look like to you?
Oh, well, it's an interesting question because it naturally starts leading into, well, what do we think the future is of what people touch, right? Because ultimately, from a business health perspective, you don't want to pay too much for a sale. And I think part of the challenge of the last 15 years is that the cotton was high and the fish were jumping and we were just pouring more money in, and it didn't matter. Like, don't look at the leaky bucket, close your ears, just spend more money. And I think right now it's probably there's a very good chance that particularly in companies that are younger and less mature, they might be beginning to build this function. There might be more pushback than ever on the traditional SE model, right? Where, okay, we get a piece of team performance. Maybe you align me to, if I work mid-market, I get a piece of mid-market's, performance, but it's going to become a harder question to answer. And so I think for an organization that is looking at the sales engineering function primarily as a way to bring revenue in, it's still to me the right model. Like I still think it's the right model. Do I think the inflated OTE numbers are still the right model? Maybe not. Right? Like maybe it doesn't make sense for, really, really high base salaries. Like that could shift. But I think ultimately the idea that we're one team, that when we win together, and that like I don't get a piece of the pie if you don't win the deal, right? That will still be true, I think, for a long time.
I guess, so in your ideal, your ideal situation, like tell us, what does it look like? How would you build this out? What would it exactly look like? Give us some, good solid numbers here.
Well, tell me more. First I thought you were saying like if we were building it from scratch, how would we structure a team? But tell me more what you're trying to learn.
Yeah, I guess like what I think would be interesting to everybody listening is more or less like we're talking about the future of sales engineering, how this is going to evolve and change. And so for most people listening right now that are sales engineers, they're used to, anywhere of compensation plans from like 70-30 split or 80-20 split. In your, future world, what do you think that looks like?
It's been 70-30 for just about every role I've ever had as a sales engineer. It was 70-30 was the opening, and I always negotiated as close to 80-20 as I could get, right? Like always wanted more base. Some SEs like more upside. They want to live on the edge a little bit more, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's probably an area where I would also say if it ain't broke, right? Like it just seems to me, it seems like if I don't have the same amount of control over my destiny as a rep, should I risk my compensation in the same way? And fundamentally, I don't think so, right? Like, I don't think we should ever see a 50-50 split the way we do with most AEs. I think as you move into more senior roles where you might be playing like a level 2, like there's already an SC on the deal and they got to bring you in to like have a more in-depth conversation. Those roles I could see it making more sense to go higher in base. I could even see, for a really specialized role in a large team, a comp plan that I've seen work really well is like removing commission from the equation and going with MBOs. So I have goals that I have to hit. I need to produce a certain amount of content. I need to, do a number of cross-functional projects. I need to go to events, etc. That might be where it starts to make more sense to control your destiny a little bit more. But fundamentally, for your typical, mid-level or entry-level role, I think the current model of commission feels right to me. You got to have some skin in the game, right? It has to feel like really, like, yeah, we got the quarter. And I actually think something that a lot of sales leaders don't always think about, because they're just not thinking about it, is that makes the sales engineer team more aligned to how you get compensated as like a VP of sales than to a rep, right? So there's a little bit of this sales leaders, all the sales engineers want what you want, man. Like, like we all want the same thing. And I think that's really important and valuable.
I think it might be the biggest misconception for sales engineers or pre-sales consultants is this idea that we are just the technical resource. I find that majority of all the SEs that I talk to, they love to win. They want to be a part of generating the revenue, working with the sales team. We want to win just as badly as you do. And for some reason, I find that there's this misconception around that. And I do always like to meet with my reps on one-on-ones, especially as I'm getting to know them, and let them know, like, I'm here to win deals. I'm here to support you and win deals together. I want to win just as badly as you want to win. So if there are things that I can do to help assist in that generation of revenue, I'm here to support that function too. So I want to throw it out there because I do think it's a big, big misconception that's out there.
I think so too. And I think you just hit on, probably one of the most uh, terrifying is probably a strong word. I think it's a little scary right now to be a sales engineer who is perceived that way. And that's because if I think about AI and how AI is coming for us, and we've got, I'm not going to drop names, but we all know who they are, dropping these ads on LinkedIn like hire an AI sales engineer. You don't even
Mm-hmm.
need a person anymore, right? Like that's the kind of sales engineering that can be done by a very good chatbot. Maybe not great today, but like give it a month, give it 2 months, give it a year, right? Like they'll be able to answer product questions. In all my teams, one of the things I always tell SCs to say no to is the dreaded, hey man, I'm going to run the demo. I'm going to do it. I just want you to join just in case. Like, in case somebody asks a question and I don't know the answer, can you be there for an hour? Right? Like, no. And that's a good example of something that AI can help with that, right? A rep, there's a world right now. Today, I saw a demo earlier this week of a tool that I can have Zoom chat telling me, what the answer is to the question as it's being asked. Like that's right now. So if that's all you're doing in your job, look for a different culture. Look for a different sales organization. Because it is going to be partnership and it is going to be the softer, the sales part, the how do I win credibility? How do I help multi-thread? How do I build relationships with the customer? That's going to be what saves us in the end.
Yeah, and AI is very interesting. I mean, it's just an interesting time with all of the LLMs going around, and people are thinking it's the one-stop shop to solve all of our problems, is what it feels like. But I think just like as a sales engineering organization, how can we leverage AI to like help us do our job better? Like aside from using it for RFPs, like
Mhm.
that's kind of been we've heard that, but like where do you see it can fit in as a tool for us to, we're 10xing developers with things like Copilot and Codium and those autocompletes. Like, how can we 10x SEs using AI?
It's a great question, and I actually really appreciate that you were like, not RFPs, we know, because that's an easy one. I think some of it depends on what the org is doing. What I'm noticing talking to colleagues and friends across my network is that something that's happening everywhere is a little bit of like do more with less, right? Which we've all been saying for years, but like now it hits different. Like it feels no, really do a lot more with less.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm going to downsize your team this year, that kind of stuff. And so this is like really important to be thinking about because I can't yet with AI, no matter what anybody says, I can't like replace a human being. We're not there yet. I hope we never get there quite that way. But what are the tasks that we put on the SE team? And I think in a lot of organizations, you're kind of like this weird, yes, deal work. We would all agree that's the most important thing for you to be doing. But like also could you build something for product marketing? Could you do a blog post? Could you man, this is a really common one, could you man the product questions channel in Slack? Like could you um build some of these tools like Novatic or Reprise or like these tools that are the sort of click through. Can you build like 5 of those for the team? I think that's a lot of the stuff where it will not only be the stuff that 10x is an SE, it will be the stuff that 10x is pretty much everybody who supports revenue, not in the field, right? So if your job is to create content, that's where we're going. I also think a lot of SCs end up being responsible for internal product knowledge and like
Mm-hmm.
databases. And so anything like that, where it's truly just about ensuring that like what is usually static is dynamic and updated. Those are the areas where I think that's where I would take a call, right? If someone was prospecting me, I mean, don't, but like if you It will take
I was
the
like, you're
call.
about to get so many LinkedIn messages after this podcast drops now regarding all of those individual features.
If you got it, I will take the call. But those are the areas. Is it's the stuff that I don't really need. You know, if I put myself back in the shoes of an IC, when I knew that I could like throw on a pair of headphones and like jam and not talk to anybody, that's the stuff we're gonna want to automate, right? It's the connection, it's the like building rapport internally. Again, that multi-threading with customers, trying to go do deep research on customers. Those are the things I would want my team actually spending their hours on versus like data entry.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm actually really curious because there's something that I've seen at certain companies where they actually have more of this hybrid role out there of like what I would classify as an account engineer. It's like a combination of an AE plus an SE. They're not necessarily doing the lead generation aspect of it, but they're getting past qualified leads, and then they're taking those leads through demo, through closing, and becoming kind of this hybrid sort of person on a team or doing less with more. I mean, do you think that's, something that will be in the future of sales engineering? Do you still think there'll be these two distinct roles that are out there where a sales engineer can sit on the revenue side, not necessarily the implementation side, and still be focused on deal strategy, demos, and working towards closing as much business as possible?
I think, yeah, that's probably where we're going, but it won't. I hesitate. No one has convinced me that the team sell isn't still vital in like upmarket sales when I'm talking to really large customers who are complex and that there's a lot of stakeholders and yeah, if your ICP is like small medium business, that might be okay, right? Like would I want to do that job myself? Probably not. But what you're really describing to me is a badass AE who cares about the solution and is not necessarily technical, but technical enough, maybe a nerd, right? Like a nerdy AE. Go forth, my friend. Like go crush it. That's great. Um, but the thing that we don't talk about enough in this business is the fact that it's not really about what the person holds in their brain. It's the fact that people don't like salespeople. Like they don't. When was the last time you went, you know what I want to do today? I want to talk to 6 salespeople and I want them all to compete for my business. Like somebody out there would say yes to that, but it's not me. It's not most people, right? And so just the fact that there is someone else that I can bounce off of as the seller, right? Like someone I can riff with, someone else who's doesn't have commission breath, right? Like they're just there to help. Um, Even if they're like not that good, it helps. Like it moves the needle. I've seen it over and over again. I have worked for companies that have sold to the biggest companies in the world. I have worked for companies that sell to little mom and pop shops. And it is really hard to win trust and build credibility alone. It's just hard. And if the deal is transactional and your product is kind of selling itself and you're just there to facilitate and you're taking an order, it's fine. You don't need that. But when it's like, I got to convince you not only to do this with us, but I might be convincing you to do this at all. Like, good luck. You need a team, you need help.
I actually had something like that happen before. I was meeting with a client, and it's me and my rep, we're together, and client says, hey, they're introducing us to other people. This is the AE, he's the sales guy. That comes, this is Ryan, he's the technical product guy. I was like, whoa, wait a second. I'm on the sales team too. What about me? And I started to feel offended for a minute. What? I was a part of the sale. And I thought, I was like, wait a second. That's actually the designated role that I play right now, is being the trusted technical resource as part of the deal. I serve the purpose. We were doing the sale even though they didn't feel the sale was coming through. They just thought I was there to help out throughout the project, even though I was helping move the sale along. And so that's one of those moments that's always stood out to me in my career, because I remember being so mad in the moment. Like an hour passes by and I'm like, that's exactly what I'm supposed to do. Okay, all right, on to the next one.
It's funny you say that. One of my go-to pieces of advice to anybody who's like early in pre-sales or wanting to get into pre-sales is like, you gotta own your intro. It doesn't matter if someone already introed you. It's like if someone mispronounces your name, you can say the name correctly, right? Like, Miss Amir, I'm not about to call you out. But like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like it doesn't matter if the AE says it and you're like, that's not quite right. Correct it, right? You don't have to be like, well, the AE said it wrong, so I'm going to correct you, right? But it's like, hey, you know what? By the way, I talk to our customers all day, every day. My job really is to help you understand what makes sense for you. My job is to understand where you're really needing a solution and to help you understand how we might be able to get you there. Like you just have to take over, right? Like when the spotlight shines on you, like ham it up. It's your turn.
I think that's great advice, especially I think it was Rue over the week last week posted something about how AEs are introducing their SEs, and I think being able to take it when it's your turn to take it and be like, I also want to add. That's like a very good way of just clarifying your role and how you see yourself and why you're at the table as well with the sales rep and the other folks. Um, Another place that I do want to take this conversation that I think is a very interesting topic right now is the whole concept of an SE at the C-suite. We're seeing this new role popping up, the chief solutions officer, um, and some thoughts around that. I'll just open the floor with that Christina, and what are your thoughts starting with the CSO, and I have some thoughts of some of the things that are coming out, and I would love
Yeah.
to learn more on there.
All right, look, you took me there. I let me say first that every organization is different and that while there are lots of things that are like fundamentals that can apply to everyone, every company has its own nuance. I like to say everywhere is a shit show. It's just, is it your shit show, right? Like, is it the one that's right for you? Um, let me take a small step back. We talked a couple minutes ago about how, we're off the gravy train of the last 15 years. Like, we're all thinking differently. We're all being tasked with thinking differently. So when I think about one of the biggest areas of just mediocrity in SaaS, it has been the post sales experience. There's no question about it, right? Like if a company does it well, um, it's a rare and beautiful thing, right? Like I'll renew with you forever, jack my price up, you got me, right? Because I feel supported and cared for and understood. And a lot of companies get that wrong. So how do we fix this, right? Like what do we do? And I understand the instinct because if you are a sales engineer, a sales engineering leader, it's like, well, these guys would totally fix that, right? Like if you just put someone on the account from the top of the funnel through to the end of the life cycle, we did it, right? And I think that can be a way to do it. I think that has some very interesting like future bandwidth. I have
Hmm.
questions about like how do you scale that?
Yep.
Um, do you have an SE with it's why a lot of the time like a relationship or account manager has a book of accounts, right? And it can't get too big or they stop providing a good experience. Like it's just no good. So I think you run into the same problem if you keep going in that direction for too long. So that's one you could play with that. Another way is to say like, well, is a handoff inherently a negative thing or is a bad handoff a negative thing, right? Like could we just do that better? Like could we
Hmm.
build processes that allow us to like create a smooth transition? I personally I've been a buyer a lot. I don't know that I've ever really had an experience where I went, I wish I hadn't signed this contract because they didn't know everything I said in the discovery call 3 months ago. Like personally, I've never had that experience. So that's one piece of it, right? Is like we have a problem to solve in post sales. I suspect there's another problem that we're not talking about openly, which is I'm a sales engineering leader. I am ambitious and have aspirations to get to the executive table. How will I do that? I better carry sales engineering with me. That's the thing I know best, right? And so, like, I think some of it's like, if you want to be an executive, do you really think that any board of directors on the planet gives a shit what's going on in the sales engineering department? Because they don't. They don't care. They don't care what product marketing is doing. They don't care what demand gen is doing. They don't care about sub functions of the business. And that's good. That's the way it should be. It's supposed to, you really don't want the board sniffing around what you're doing. I can tell you from experience that's not a nice feeling. So what do, right? Like, do you invent a new function that is essentially what chief solutions officers were, but I also carry sales engineering with me? Or do you just accept that we all have to have a mindset shift, that everybody at the top has to be thinking in a systems mindset, learn revenue architecture, learn about net recurring revenue, make friends with finance, right? Like, figure out how, if you really care about sales engineering, where does that fit in the machine? Because if you think of revenue as a machine, there are little areas where you can make tweaks, you can turn a dial and see what happens on the other end of it. But what this stuff is doing, what it sounds like to me, is just a lot of like, I want to be more important, which is great. Be more important. I support that. But like, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing now, which is working in the business while I go decide I want to work on the business. And like, there are not a lot of executives that do both of those things well. You either are a doer or you are a vision person. And if you're both, you're very, very rare. They're out there, they exist, but it's probably not you. And like, that's okay. Like, that's okay. I think we all need to embrace more like what we really bring and what we're good at. And that's probably the issue I take most with this like chief solutions officer stuff, is like, I'm sure there are businesses out there where that works and it makes sense. But why does it work? It works because there's someone in the C-suite who is thinking about a full cycle experience for the customer. You don't need to invent a function to do that. Everybody should be doing that. The CEO, the COO, everybody should be doing that. We're all responsible, because without the customer, we don't have a business. So it's not, that's probably my biggest issue, is it's being framed like this, like, oh, what if we thought about the customer? It's like, well, guys, like, come on.
Yeah.
You
Wow.
don't need a new title to do that.
Yeah.
For the ambitious SEs that are out here listening to this call, what title for an executive should they be aiming for in their career?
Oh, that's a interesting question. I would say at a broad level, if you love sales, try being a VP of sales, right? Try that on, see what that feels like. See what it feels like to not only carry a number, but carry a number that you don't get to work every deal. See how that feels, right? You might love it. And in that case, you may have a future state as like a CRO who is a pure sales CRO. If you find that you like ops, like you like sitting down and building a workflow, and you like spreadsheets, and you like that stuff, another type of CRO, and I was more like this when I was in the SVP role, you might be like the COO of sales, right? Where your job is to think about systems and how all of these different sub functions should work together. And if that gets you excited, you can absolutely be a CRO. You could be a COO. You could, it just depends what you like doing. If you find that you are a badass leader and you're just crushing it as a people leader, and then you move into second line and you find that you love coaching other leaders, you might be a CEO. Like, that might be what you should do. But I think the idea that there's any reason to have a chief solutions engineering officer is just missing the point that, like, there's nothing wrong with a sub function. It's okay, but you're probably not going to you're going to have to do something other than that to get to the C-suite. You're going to have to do another job. You can't just be an SE and then go present to the board. Like, that's just not, why would
A
you?
demo to the board, so to speak.
No. Abort. Never demo to a board of directors. It's worse than Gartner. Don't do it.
I think that that's actually really like sage advice because, as someone who was always wanting to one day, reach to that executive level, when I was first starting my SE career, I was looking up and was wondering which one do I fit into, like as an SE, and uh, it was tough to just be like, I don't really see myself in any of those because of X, Y, and Z. But what you just described, it was like, oh, actually, it's not that far fetched of all the
Not at all.
skills that I'm developing of one day becoming like a CRO. Even I could even see, some SEs transitioning onto like the product side, chief product officer,
Yes.
especially if you're really into understanding the customer needs and designing what like a true product solution would look like. And so that's it. It's a blessing and a curse in the sense that we can divert whichever way up the tree, but then it's like, which way do I go and pick and how do I decide? Versus if I was just like in product, or if I was just in sales, or if I was just in marketing, it's like, it's an obvious. I started as, an associate marketing person, I can go up to a CMO. I think as an SC, we have to, I think when we were first speaking, Christina, we were like, we all stumble into this role. And then
Yep.
so now we're like stumbling around of how do we actually progress our career. And maybe on that, like, you've been doing this for some time now. What is like some advice you could give to like the next generation of SEs who are trying to almost like map their career out and like give, like, what do I want to, what can I achieve in like the next 10 years to almost like, how can you give me some guidance on this? It's like, I'm lost. It's like,
Sounds like you have some decision paralysis right now, Samir.
yeah,
It's the engineer inside you coming out right now, being like, I have so many options, but as an engineer, I need all of the stats to make the right decision for me. So,
Totally.
I guess for everybody out there, Christina, direct us. Tell us
Oh
how to make
boy.
this decision.
Oh, if only I could, I would never work again. Look, something that's really hard is figuring out, and it changes. It changes. It's different in your 20s. It's different in your 30s. It changes. But what does success mean, right? Like if you can think about what success means, because like the reality is most of us are happy enough in our jobs, right? Like we might not be passionate every day, but like we might have moments of excitement and passion. And like, what do those look like? And like, my advice to everybody who asks me a question like this is, what makes you feel fulfillment? Is it because a lot of SEs, it's some version of like, well, I like to help people, right? Like I want to help. I want to, I don't need to be in the spotlight. I want to be the best supporting actor, right? Like I don't need the Oscar for the spotlight. And so like, okay, well, dig into that. Like, what do you like helping with? At the end of a day, when you've done a bunch of tasks, what do you think about that makes you smile, right? Is it, man, I was interviewing a candidate and he said one of the most wonderful things I've ever heard. I ask everybody to tell me a win story, right? Like tell me something that, you did that just, you think about it and it makes you smile. And I'm always curious how people answer that question. And this guy went, well, I had 3 AEs on my team this quarter that just started and they all closed a deal. And like, it was awesome. And it was like, like, that's awesome. So, if I was talking to that guy about what should he be doing next, I might be thinking like, do you want to be a coach? Do you want to be a leader? Do you want to help other people win? Right. And then there's the other people who answer, and it's perfect. It's also very exciting to hear is like, I closed the biggest deal with someone who didn't want to buy our product and I got them, and that makes me smile, right? And it's like, well, if those are the things that get you excited, you might maybe want to explore sales. Like, I don't know, maybe check it out, right? Like it's really about, what is success? Is it lots of money? Is it doing more things you like doing all day than things you don't like? There's no version of work where we love every minute of every day, but how do you get to more minutes of, yeah, like that felt good? That will guide you, and it's different for everybody. So if you want to be an engineer and make a stack rank and put it in a spreadsheet, you totally can. Like, can. It'll be subjective shit in your spreadsheet cells, but like, you can code it. I'll help. Like, I can let the color code.
Samir, please grade this between 1 and 10 for each of these feelings you might have today, and let me know.
Oh man, the only problem.
Right. So, you know what? I mean, free advice, like, if you want to do something different every day, you might think about freelancing or entrepreneurship, starting something that is going to be different every day. Like, I think, Samir, your role right now is a little bit of every day is different.
Yep, and I'm loving it. So
There you go.
Somebody's got to say something now, Samir. I don't know.
It's okay. I feel like maybe this is just what it feels like to have a breakthrough. Like, I'll enjoy it.
yeah. No, I think that it's just there's so many things that you have said over the last few minutes, like that keep sticking out to me. It's like the difference between working in the business for working on the business. Like, I've never really heard someone differentiate those two, and that kind of has solidified like the difference between what people do at the executive level versus what people do at the non-executive levels. And like, I never understood that differentiation in it. When you said that, it's like, that's clicked for me. And then, all my career I've been working in the business. I've never worked on the business, so I have no idea what that even looks like, or how does that even work. And I feel like many people who want to get to that executive level, I don't know, there's no really time that you will actually get that skill until you get there. um, unless you're like talking to those who are doing it, and you can.
But no two people are alike, right? Like, no two people are alike. You could go read 100 books on how to be the best leader or the best executive you want to be. You could listen to every podcast, you could do everything on YouTube, and at the end of the day, whenever you get into that seat, you're going to have your own style, because we're all built differently. So the way that you might think you want to be, you can borrow things from other people, but at the end of the day, it's going to be you. So it's about just aligning yourself to what it is that you ultimately want. I don't know, Christina said something that was impactful. It's just like, how do you find success and fulfillment? If you just find those things, go chase after those things that make you feel like you're successful, that you're fulfilled. If you're doing those things, odds are you're living a very happy, fulfilled career. If you have those things in your career, your life is going to look pretty awesome at the end of the day too.
Indeed. I would say also something to just, maybe wind down with for me is the amount of gratitude that I think we should all feel. Not just being in tech, which is a prosperous, even right now when it's like, woof, if you follow the stock market, tech seems scary right now. But if you're in it, even if you go through a period of uncertainty like this, gosh, like what an awesome, like, we get paid a lot of money for what we're doing all day long, like every single one of us. And so, like, that's like one layer. And then to click into it and to say, I get to win. I get to chase and win and hunt, and I don't have to join a commit call ever where I'm being asked to forecast. Like, what's better? I really think that this is the best job in SaaS. Like, what's better than that? We should all be really grateful to be in this industry. And if you're trying to get into it and you're on the outside, you're trying to get into it, like, fight for it, man. It's worth it. The water's fine. Like, even now, even when it's and there's people looking for jobs, it's a community, it's a small world, it's a network. One of the things I always say to other people who are in leadership roles in SaaS is that, remember that there was a time you were on the outside, and bring people in, like, build a longer table, put more chairs on the table, right? And so I always say anybody, and I recognize saying this on a podcast, we'll see how this goes, but anybody who's ever trying to break in, I will always take that call. Like I will always hear someone out who wants to get into this business, because I think the future of this business is really bright and exciting, and it might feel different or look different. It might get comped differently. We might have a different tech stack, but ultimately it is the best job in SaaS.
I love that.
That's so awesome to hear, because I feel the same way. Like it's hard to get into, but once you're in, it's just awesome. I recently saw somebody that had reached out to me. They wanted to break into sales engineering. Said, look, if you want to do it, here's some things I think that are helpful. But you're going to have to work for it. And they totally worked for it. And I saw the other day they got a job, posted on LinkedIn. It's like, yes, how
Huzzah!
awesome is that? Like, that is it. And seeing that on my side, I'm like, that is it. Because I know how hard it is to make that happen. And so to see it on LinkedIn, it's like, those are the things we should be blowing up like crazy, because that's the amazing thing. You wanted to make a career change. You took the effort, you took the time to make it happen, intentional about it, and then it happens. Like, that's the stuff that's awesome to see.
That is the stuff. I love it.
I love that. I think that's a great spot to wrap with. Thank you for all the knowledge, Christina, and the conversation. It was amazing. You've left me with more things to think about, which is
My pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us too. I've never really seen Samir speechless. He loves to talk, but I can tell he's a little bit speechless right now. So
Well, it was a real pleasure getting to meet and speak with you both, and have a great rest of your day. And I hope I am not about to get blown up with AI vendors. So we'll see what happens.
you'll have to keep us posted.
I don't know. Yeah.
No promises. All right, friends.
Thank
All
you.
right, bye, Christina.
Well, Samir, you're speechless. I gotta say, I can see it on you. It's like, so tell me, what are you feeling right now?
I mean, I think just a lot of things. The way she was able to lay out the different executives and how being an SE can align up to those different positions was like in a way that finally like clicked to me. Because for a while, when a couple years ago, I was looking up and be like, why is there no like chief sales engineering person? But then once you like peel back the layers and it's like, okay, what's the point of the executives up there? And for her to say it's the difference between working on the business and working in the business. And I was like, oh, wow, that's like a huge differentiator. You either have to have the vision and like, this is where we're going in 2, 5, 10 years. And then you have the people on the ground actually like making that vision happen. And so it's really difficult to be both of those people, which is why we have those differentiations. And your executive team is also like a barrier between the board and then the people who are doing the work. And I think that this is not to like diminish sales engineering, but we are definitely more so on like making it happen versus like thinking about how, like what the future is. It's like, oh, all of these things need to happen. Yes, there is some like vision around it, but it's more like we are building it versus thinking about what it should look like. And I think that's just like like naturally what our role is, which is why I think it does make sense that there hasn't been like an explicit chief sales engineering officer, because it's too narrow. Like the C-suite executives are looking at so much more than just our function. And just like hearing that finally solidified some open.
And I think it's cool too, like for the sales engineers out there, like you don't have to go into leadership. You don't have to go into the executive table. But if you want those things, there's pathways of getting and taking your career there, because we do sit at the center of the organization and you touch so many different aspects of the business. You can go latch on to one of those things that you really like and say, you know what? I've really enjoyed doing product marketing. Maybe that's how I want to feel fulfillment out of my job. I want to be the chief marketing person, focus on product marketing and those kinds of things. Maybe you really love seeing your customers become successful. Guess what? Chief operations officer sounds awesome. You can now work on what that handoff process looks like. How do you get customers live, successful, and keep them, coming back for more? Or you're like the sales engineer. It's like, I love sales. Look, there's chief sales officer, there's chief revenue officer. There are plenty of sales officer positions out there. You can go do the reporting to the board. You can go sit in forecast meetings and have your team report up to you and say, how do we drive more sales? And you get your team fired up. So there's a pathway into taking those. But if you just want to say, like, look, I just want to be the best product expert at this particular thing, you can go on and become the top sales engineer out there. You can become a principal SC. Become a principal SC, and everyone's going to have to come to you for every question that's out there. So whatever it is that you want, whatever style it is that you have, I mean, we're all engineers at the end of the day. There's engineering in a lot of different facets. So if that doesn't interest you, there's ways of still turning your career into the thing that drives as much fulfillment as you want.
Yeah, 100%. And it's also just like requires a little bit more self-reflection, at least for myself, of, okay, what are the things that I enjoy? And I enjoy a lot of things. It's like, okay, if I were to rank that enjoyment, and that can help like guide me into going into the future that I want. But she's absolutely right. Like right now I'm doing a lot of things in my current role, and that's fun for me just because it's always something new. Every day is different, and it's I kind of like the chaos. I very much thrive in like stuff happening all around me all the time. But that's not for everyone, and you have to really understand what you like to do. And the beauty of as sales engineering, like what you said, we are in the center, and so if there's something that is appealing to you, you can lean into that and approach it some more. I guess
I just think like the idea of like finding the fulfillment is like, it stands out to me so much. It's something I really resonate with. And I think it's important for anybody potentially listening to this podcast. Is doesn't matter if you're in sales engineering or you're in a different role. I think it's applicable to anything in your career. Is if you don't feel fulfilled in your career, it's never too late to make a change. Like I said, I saw somebody who reached out to me on LinkedIn, and they recently got a job and they made a pivot in their career. You don't have to be stuck in what you're doing today. So if you're wanting to break into sales engineering, reach out to people. The sales engineers we like to help, and we want to see more success stories like that. And so I just find that to be a really amazing note, just from like a career business perspective. If you ever stop feeling the fulfillment, it's time to look towards something different. And I will hype up sales engineering for as loudly as I can, because it is a job that provides so much fulfillment. You get to do so many cool, unique things. So if you are out there and you want this, just make it your passion. Make it the thing that you're just not going to let anybody stop you from getting. It's available to you to go do. And so I don't know. I just really like that note from an executive member saying, like, look, find what makes you happy, chase after it, and you'll see all these other things happen. It's the number one thing that just popped out to me today.
Yeah, finding what fulfills you and like leaning into that is huge, because I mean we do spend a lot of time at work, and if we're doing something that's we frankly don't like, that's not going to lead to a very great life. I think you had said it. Just if you're doing something that fulfills you, you're winning at life. Um, and I think that's a huge thing to keep in mind. And she was absolutely right too. It's I mean, we're biased because we're SEs, but it is the best role in SaaS. You get to have the fun of making sales, like chasing prospects and competing against other folks, while also having some like security from a financial perspective, because you have a heavier base and not as much commission, which is gives you a little bit more security, and then you also get to like talk with marketing and influence how the product is going, and then interact with all the engineers, and so you get a lot of bit of everything, and so
Bum, bum, bum. The best role in SaaS. I think that's the perfect way to wrap up today's podcast. Is like, if you want to, do something like this again, people out there willing to help out. So thought it was just a great episode today.
Alrighty, this wraps up today's episode